In the shadow of the Cascades, Alara Voss committed the unforgivable sin. She defied her father. When she refused to marry the wealthy timber baron he'd chosen, Harlan Voss delivered his verdict. He sent her to live with Ronan Vale, the silent ridge boy whose parents had drowned in a flash flood years ago. The town called him worthless. Alara called him her sentence. Their new home was barely standing, a forgotten shack with gaps in the shingles and packed earth for a floor. Alara's tears fell freely that first night as wind moaned through splintered boards. But when morning came, Ronan quietly offered her a hatchet. Would this punishment become the very thing that finally sets them both free? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Alara Voss stared at her reflection in the fractured mirror propped against the shack wall. Her auburn hair, normally pinned in elegant coils, hung in loose waves down her back. 2 days in this ridge prison, and already she felt herself changing, diminishing. She tugged at her once pristine traveling dress, now smudged with dirt and soot. Back at Voss Lodge, she'd have had 5 dresses just for morning wear alone. Her lady's maid would have heated water for a proper bath, not the icy stream water her reluctant host had pointed to with a grunt. Insufferable, she whispered, thinking not of the primitive conditions, but of her father's thunderous face, as he'd practically thrown her from his carriage. You'll thank me when this stubbornness is finally broken. Harlan Voss had declared, 1 month with Vale will have you begging to marry Everett Lang. Alara's jaw tightened. She'd rather live in this squalor forever than marry that grasping, pompous fool. Outside, the steady rhythm of splitting would continue. Ronan Vale had barely spoken 10 words since her arrival. He'd simply shown her the shack, indicated where she could sleep, and resumed his endless chores. Alara had been raised hearing whispers about the Ridge Boy, his parents' tragic death in a sudden flood, how he'd somehow survived alone, appearing in town only to trade pelts and fish. The ladies at church socials called him wild. The men called him worse, yet nothing had prepared her for his quiet intensity. Ronan moved with purpose, wasting no motion or words. His dark eyes seemed to take everything in, revealing nothing in return. Alara jumped at a sudden knock on the doorframe. Ronan stood there, a bundle of kindling in his arms. "Fire's dying," he said simply, nodding toward the small stone hearth. Alara crossed her arms. "I don't know how to tend it." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. "Never needed to," she added defensively. Ronan set down the wood and crouched by the hearth. His movements were methodical as he arranged kindling atop the embers. From his pocket he withdrew a knife, worn antler handle, blade polished from years of use. With practiced strokes, he shaved curls of wood from a small branch. "Catches better," he explained, noticing her watching. The first complete sentence he'd offered. Alara moved closer, curious despite herself. "That knife, it looks old." "My father's." 2 words, yet she heard volumes in them. He worked silently, building the fire with a craftsman's precision. Soon flames danced merrily, pushing back the ridge chill. Alara settled on a rough-hewn stool, extending her hands toward the warmth. Her stomach growled audibly. Ronan glanced at her, then to the small table where yesterday's hard bread sat untouched. "You didn't eat." "I couldn't," Alara admitted. "I don't know how to prepare anything." Again, that flicker in his eyes. He stood, retrieving a pot and moving to the door. "Where are you going?" Panic edged into her voice. Being alone was worse than his silent presence. "Stream water." He paused, seeming to consider something. "You can come learn." Alara hesitated, looking at her impractical shoes. With a sigh, she followed him into the afternoon light. The stream burbled cheerfully just beyond the shack clearing. Ronan knelt, filling the pot in a small pool where the water ran clear. Alara watched, noting how he avoided stirring up silt. "Upstream for drinking," he said. "Downstream for washing." Simple wisdom, Alara thought. Knowledge she'd never needed. Back inside, Ronan added tubers and dried venison to the pot, hanging it over the fire. From a small pouch, he sprinkled in herbs. "What is that?" Elara asked. "Wild sage, ramp leaf," he stirred with a carved cedar spoon. "Makes the taste better." Elara observed his efficient movements. This ridgeman knew more about cooking than she did. The thought both humbled and irritated her. Later, as they silently shared this simple stew, Elara studied Ronan's profile in the firelight. His features might have been handsome if not for their severe set, jaw always tight, eyes watchful. "Why did you agree to this?" she finally asked. "Taking in your enemy's daughter?" Ronan's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "Your father isn't my enemy. He thinks the worst of you. Most do." No bitterness colored his words. Just simple acknowledgement. "Then why?" Ronan set down his bowl. His fingers absently traced the handle of the knife at his belt. "Shaq needs work. Winter's coming." He glanced at her hands, soft and unmarked by labor. 4 hands better than 2. Elara almost laughed at the practicality. "I'm afraid these hands don't know how to do much. They can learn." His eyes met hers directly for the first time. "If they want to." Something in his gaze, not pity, not judgment, but a simple assessment, made Elara sit straighter. "I suppose they must," she replied, surprising herself with her resolve. Ronan nodded once, then resumed eating. No more words passed between them, but something had shifted like the first crack in spring ice. Outside, darkness gathered as the ridge winds whispered secrets to the ancient firs. Elara listened, wondering what tales they might tell of the silent man across from her, and what story was yet to be written in this unexpected chapter of her life. 3 days had become a week. Elara's hands, once soft and unblemished, now bore angry red blisters from her first attempts at washing clothes in the stream. The cold water had numbed her fingers until she could barely feel the coarse soap slipping away. "Stupid, useless things," she muttered, looking at her trembling hands. Even the simplest tasks defeated her. Yesterday, she'd spilled half their drinking water trying to carry it from stream. This morning she'd nearly set the shack ablaze, attempting to build up the fire alone. Worst of all was Ronan's response. No scolding, no impatience, just that steady gaze and quiet correction. His competence made her failures more humiliating. Elara slumped against a cedar trunk, exhaustion settling into her bones. A week ago, she'd been reading Italian sonnets in her father's parlor. Now she couldn't even manage to wash a simple shirt. Her indigo traveling dress, the last clean garment she possessed, caught on a jagged limb as she stood. The sound of tearing fabric echoed like a rifle shot in the quiet forest. "No!" Elara examined the long rip along the side seam. Edges frayed beyond any simple mending. Tears welled in her eyes, then spilled over. It wasn't just about the dress. Something inside her snapped. Without thinking, she gathered her skirts and began walking away from the shack, away from Ronan's knowing eyes, away from this life she'd been thrust into. The ridge path sloped downward. Town lay that way, she knew. 15 miles of rugged trail, but surely better than this slow death of dignity. Her father had been wrong. She wouldn't crawl back, begging for Evertlang. She'd find work, perhaps as a tutor or companion to an elderly widow. Anything but this. Elara had managed perhaps 2 miles when dark clouds rolled over the peaks. The temperature dropped suddenly as fat raindrops began pelting through the canopy. She quickened her pace, but the path grew treacherous, mud slicking under her impractical boots. A clap of thunder startled her. She slipped, tumbling down a short embankment, her dress catching and tearing further. Rain poured now, soaking through her clothes in seconds. Elara huddled against a boulder, shivering violently. Foolish. So foolish to leave without preparation, without knowing the way. "Elara." Ronan's voice cut through the downpour. Relief and shame warred inside her as his tall figure emerged through the sheet of rain. "Going somewhere?" he asked, crouching beside her. No accusation, just that maddening calm. "Town," she said through chattering teeth. 15 miles, no food, storm coming. He recited the facts without judgment. "You'd have died. Better than living like this." The words tore out of her. I'm useless here. I can't cook or clean or carry water. I can't even wash clothes without ruining my hands. My father was right. I'm nothing but a pampered, useless. Stop. Ronan's voice stayed quiet, but something in it silenced her. You've had 7 days. I've had 7 years. Alara blinked at him through rain-soaked lashes. Took me 3 months to make fire properly, he continued, offering his hand. 6 to trap without checking empty snares. A year to build that shack. She hesitated, then took his outstretched hand. His calloused palm swallowed her blistered one. I didn't ask for you, Ronan said, as he helped her stand. Any more than you asked for me. The simple truth struck Alara mute. In her self-pity, she'd forgotten he had no choice in this arrangement either. But here we are, he added, shrugging off his coat and draping it over her shoulders. The rough wool's warmth engulfed her. It smelled of cedar and smoke. Not unpleasant, she realized with surprise. They walked in silence, Alara stumbling on the slick path. Each time Ronan's hand appeared at her elbow, steadying, never lingering. Back at the shack, he built up the fire while Alara huddled beside it, still wrapped in his coat. When her shivering eased, he handed her a bundle of clothing. Simple men's garments, worn but clean. All I have, he said, until we can dry yours. Alara clutched the bundle. The weight of her situation settled like a sodden cloak. No more running. No rescue. Thank you, she whispered. Ronan nodded, turning to give her privacy. Behind the rough blanket they'd hung as a partition, she examined her ruined indigo dress. Beyond salvage, like the life she'd left behind. She emerged in Ronan's too large shirt and trousers, rolled at wrists and ankles. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. Something had shifted, a first surrender to what was, rather than what had been. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the shack walls a fragile truce had formed. Alara positioned her hands on the small hatchet, copying Ronan's grip. He nodded, watching as she swung at the kindling. The wood split with a satisfying crack. Not perfectly, but usable. Better, he said. 2 weeks had passed since her failed escape. Each morning since, Alara had risen before dawn, determined to master one new skill. Her blisters had hardened into calluses. Her once soft hands now told stories of work and perseverance. I want to learn everything, she declared the morning after the storm. Ronan had simply nodded, as if expecting nothing less. They settled into a rhythm. Mornings for water and firewood, afternoons for foraging and repairs, evenings for food and mending. Alara shadowed Ronan's efficient movements, asking questions only when necessary. Today, having finally mastered basic fire tending, she watched him work on something small by the hearth. His whittling knife moved in smooth, controlled arcs across a piece of cedar. "What are you making?" she asked, settling beside him. "Spoon." He displayed the half-formed utensil. "We need another." Alara studied the graceful curve taking shape beneath his blade. "Could I try to make something useful?" Surprise flickered across his face, a slight widening of eyes, a pause in his rhythm. He considered, then reached into his pocket and drew out a smaller knife. "My first one," he explained, handing it over. "Blade's not as sharp. Safer for learning." The handle fit her palm, worn smooth from years of use. Alara felt oddly honored to be entrusted with something so personal. Ronan picked out another chunk of cedar, showed her the grip and the push-away stroke, then slid it across to her. "Always cut away from yourself," he warned. Her first passes were awkward. Though it fought back, the knife skated. Frustration flared when the blade nicked her thumb. "Patience," Ronan murmured. "What has its own mind? Work with it, not against it." Alara drew a slow breath, recalling the ruined laundry, the spilled pail, the string of early failures. She'd beaten those. This was only one more. She eased her grip, took smaller, deliberate strokes. Bit by bit, the cedar surrendered. "The grain shows you the path," Ronan said, voice low and even. "See how it runs? Follow it." Alara nodded, settling into the rhythm. The shack filled with the soft rasp of blades and the fire's occasional snap. Afternoons slid into evening gold. Her shoulders burned, but she kept on. When she finally laid the knife down, Her spoon was lopsided, the bowl shallow, the handle thick and clumsy. "It's awful," she sighed. Ronan turned it over in his calloused fingers. "It'll hold stew," he said. "That's what counts." The plain truth warmed her more than the fire. Form didn't matter. Function did. Ridge rules, not finishing school polish. They cooked rabbit stew together, Ilera now easy with the steps. When it was ready, Ronan reached for the bowls, paused, then served himself with his old spoon. He filled hers and pressed her new one into her hand. "First use," he said quietly. She dipped the crooked spoon into the broth. It worked, imperfections and all. They ate without speaking until Ilera broke the hush. "My father would faint, seeing me eat with this. Seeing me survive without maids, without silk." She turned her calloused palms upward. "You never thought I could. Can you?" Ronan's dark eyes held hers. Ilera thought it through. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a timber baron's pampered daughter, helpless beyond velvet walls. Now she split kindling, coaxed fire, shaped tools instead of buying them. "I'm starting to believe I can," she said. Something close to a smile brushed Ronan's mouth. "Good." After supper, Ilera set her spoon beside the hearth. Not pretty, but hers, born of her own effort. Maybe the first useful thing she'd ever made. That night on her rough palate, she felt remade. Muscles sore from honest labor, hands marked by work instead of idleness. Tomorrow she'd learn another task, build something more. For the first time since arriving, Ilera fell asleep without plotting escape. The ride to town took 3 hours on Ronan's old mare. Ilera sat behind him, pressed to his broad back, the closeness both unsettling and steadying. Holding his waist to stay balanced had stopped feeling improper after the first mile. "We need flour, salt, coffee if they've got it," Ronan called over his shoulder. "Anything else?" Ilera weighed the question. 3 weeks on the ridge had rewritten her list of essentials. "Thread. My dress still needs real mending." He nodded. They crested the rise. Below, Pine Hollow spilled along a single dirt street, a handful of weathered buildings. To Ilera's mountain-sharpened eyes, it looked almost crowded. "They'll stare," Ronan warned as they rode in. "Because I'm with you? Because everyone knows your father banished you here." His tone stayed level. "People talk." The town looked exactly as Ilera recalled from the day her father had dumped her with Ronan. A general store, chapel, saloon, blacksmith, and a scatter of other storefronts strung along the single muddy street. Several mounts stood hip-shot outside the store. Ronan eased her down from the mare, hands firm but careful at her waist, setting her gently on the boardwalk. "Ready?" he asked. Ilera tugged the borrowed coat. Another of Ronan's, oversized but clean, in a place and nodded. The bell over Grayson's mercantile gave its tinny chime as they stepped inside. Talk stopped dead. Six heads swiveled. Mr. Grayson found his voice first, merchant reflex beating shock. "Vale. Been a spell." Ronan dipped his chin and moved to the counter with his list. Ilera stayed close, feeling stares prick her spine. 2 women by the calico bolts whispered behind gloved fingers. A third, stacking canned peaches, nearly fumbled a tin when Ilera met her eyes. "My stars, that's Harlan Voss's girl. Living in sin with that ridge savage." Heat surged to Ilera's face. She had braced for gossip, but the open charge of impropriety cut deep. She and Ronan kept separate corners of the shack, their bond forged in survival, nothing more. Ronan either didn't hear or had long since grown deaf to it. He traded pelts for goods with quiet efficiency. Ilera busied herself at the notions, selecting a stout spool of brown thread and a card of needles. She set them on the counter. "Add it to Vale's account," she told Grayson, whose brows leapt. As Ronan bundled their purchases, an older woman bore down on Ilera. Gray hair scraped into a bun, mouth fixed in perpetual disapproval. "Miss Voss, I'm Mildred Carver, chapel secretary. We've been sorely worried about your predicament." "Miss Voss is correct," Ilera said, "and there's no cause for worry. A young woman of your station, unchaperoned with a man of his sort." Mrs. Carver's gaze flicked to Ronan and away. "Reverend Holt would gladly place you with a decent family." Ronan's shoulders went rigid. "That's kind," Ilera answered, finishing school polish sliding into place. but Mr. Vale has been entirely proper. I'm content. Mrs. Carver looked as if Alara had proposed a public waltz in her shift. Your poor father must be heartbroken. Such a disgrace. Something in Alara turned to iron. My father engineered this, Mrs. Carver. His words were that Mr. Vale would teach me the price of defiance. If there's disgrace, it began at Voss Lodge. A soft gasp. Our goods are ready, Ronan said, low, fingers brushing Alara's elbow. His face gave nothing away, but she felt his urgency to be gone. Outside, Alara let out a trembling breath. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. You spoke truth, Ronan cut in, lashing Sax to the saddle. No apology needed. As they turned to mount, the store door banged open. Grayson hustled out with a brown paper parcel. Near forgot. Some ladies left this for you. Miss Alara Voss was pinned across it in refined copperplate. She took it with a cautious nod. On the ride home, the package pressed warm against her ribs. When they paused to water the mare, she unwrapped it. A slim Bible, a note tucked between the pages. Asterisk for guidance in your trying circumstances. We pray for your moral rescue. Asterisk. Ladies' Aid Society. Alara stared at the sanctimonious gift, then at Ronan's unreadable face as he checked the mare's hooves. They think I need saving from you, she said, holding up the note. Ronan's eyes lifted to hers, a shadow moving behind them. Do you? She studied the man who had taught her to swing a hammer instead of swinging it for her, who gave her the warmer corner without a word, who had never once made her feel small. No, she said, and tucked the Bible into the saddlebag. But I might need saving from their charity. Ronan laughed, a short, rusty sound like a hinge that hadn't moved in years. The warmth of it outshone every polite smile she'd ever been offered in town. Alara stood on the freshly patched roof, hammer dangling at her side, drinking in the sight of their work. After a week of measuring and 3 days of sweat, the shack no longer drank rain. Her shoulders throbbed from hauling cedar shakes. Her spine sang with every shift, but pride rang louder. We did it, she whispered. Ronan nodded, coiling rope. In the month since her arrival, he had stopped doing things for her and started doing them with her. Teacher, not caretaker. Storm coming, he said, eyeing the bruised horizon. Good timing, Alara answered, grinning at the understatement. They had raced the weather from sunrise to sunset, nailing every shingle tight, sealing every seam. Should hold through winter, he added, a rare note of satisfaction in his voice. Winter, the words settled between them like a stone dropped in still water. Her father had sentenced her to 1 month. That month ended tomorrow. Thunder growled as they climbed down the ladder Ronan had lashed together from lodgepole. Alara's thoughts churned with the clouds. Someone from Voss Lodge would ride up soon, expecting a broken daughter ready to wed Everett Lang without a murmur. Inside, they moved in easy tandem, Alara stirring venison stew, Ronan slicing the last of their rye loaf. The rhythm no longer felt foreign. Tomorrow makes a month, Alara said at last. Ronan's knife stilled above the bread. My father will send for me, she went on, voice steady despite the sudden drum in her chest. He'll expect me humbled. Rain began to tick against the new shingles. Neither of them mentioned the sweet fact that not one drop came through. Are you? Ronan asked after a long hush. Alara ladled stew, thinking, was she the same girl who had stepped from the carriage in silk and fury? Not humbled, she said. Changed. They ate while the storm gathered force, wind prowling the eaves. The roof held. Will you go? Ronan asked, the question soft under the drumming rain. She looked across the table at the man who was no longer the Ridge hermit of gossip, but simply Ronan. Do you want me to? His gaze met hers, unguarded for once. No. One word, plain as axe-hewn timber. No plea, no pressure, just truth. Alara let out a breath she hadn't known she held. Then I won't. Something loosened in Ronan's face. The faint lift at one corner of his mouth was almost a smile. We should send word to your sister, he said. Let her know you're safe. Alara nodded, touched by the care. Her sister would fret if Alara simply vanished from the family ledger. The storm peaked, rain lashing the shack like thrown gravel. They cleared the table in quiet accord, each turning over the weight of what had just been decided. Later, as Alara ducked behind the blanket partition to ready for sleep, she found something new on her pallet. A pillow of rough canvas, stuffed with dried moss and fir needles, sewn in uneven but earnest stitches. She ran a thumb over the seam, startled. She had griped only once, weeks ago, about sleeping without a pillow, an offhand remark she assumed had vanished into the wind. Ronan was already rolled in his blanket on the far side of the shack when she stepped out. "You made this?" she asked, voice low. He glanced up, then away. "Figured it might help you sleep." Simple words, yet they carried the weight of a vow. A pillow meant she was staying. The shack was hers now, too. "Thank you," she managed throat tight. Ronan dipped his chin once and went back to oiling a snare by firelight. That night, rain drummed a steady tattoo on their new roof. Alara laid her head on the moss pillow. Her father had shipped her here as penance. Strange how the sentence had turned into liberty. Tomorrow she would draft the words to tell her family. Tonight, she listened to the storm and Ronan's quiet breathing across the room, no longer marking days off a calendar. The mountain air carried the first bite of autumn. Alara drew her shawl, once Ronan's spare shirt, now cut down and re-hemmed, tighter as she sat on the front step. In her lap lay one of the 3 precious sheets of paper bought on their last town run. Beside it, a stub of charcoal Ronan had shown her how to char from pine. Ink was for people with coin to spare. 6 weeks since her father had abandoned her at the shack. 2 weeks since she had chosen to remain. Each sunrise delivered another skill, another small victory. The shack itself was changing the way she was. She touched charcoal to paper, then paused. How to explain to her sister what she was only beginning to grasp? "Dear Beatrice," she wrote, the charcoal smudging under her fingers. "Astor's father has no doubt painted me as willful and lost. He may even have declared me dead to the family. I write to tell you I am very much alive, asterisk." She stopped, weighing the next line. She could not confess the whole truth, that she had found peace in plain days, that Ronan had offered kindness where her father meant cruelty. Such honesty would only feed their dread. "Asterisk, my circumstances are not the prison father described. I have shelter, food, and safety. Mr. Vale has been asterisk." She faltered. Gentleman sounded absurd for a man who gutted trout with the same hands that mended her roof. Yet he had never crossed the invisible line drawn between their pallets, had never spoken to her with anything but respect. Asterisk, respectful and instructive. "I have learned much about self-reliance." Asterisk. Alara grimaced at the stiff phrase. How to convey the earthquake inside her. The timber heiress who once sulked over lukewarm tea now bathed in icy runoff and called it refreshing. She rubbed out the last lines with her thumb and started over. "Asterisk, I miss you, B. I wish I could make you see how everything has shifted. I am learning to read the world anew. The ridges are hard, but they do not lie. There's honor in labor I never noticed before." Asterisk. A shadow crossed the page. Ronan stood beside her, game bag slung over his shoulder, returning from the trapline. "Riding home?" he asked, easing down onto the step. "To Beatrice. She'll fret." Ronan studied the smudged sheet. Hard to fit a life into one letter. "Yes," Alara sighed. "How do I tell them I'm staying without sounding ruined?" Ronan rubbed a thumb across his jaw, thinking, truth usually fits best. That I'd rather live in this shack than father's mansion. That I'd sooner haul water and split kindling than pour tea for strangers. Alara gave a rueful smile. They'd swear I'd lost my mind. Maybe not Beatrice. She glanced at him, startled. "You remember her name? You speak of her often." Ronan reached into his pocket and produced a small square of cloth. "Found these. Thought you'd want them." Inside lay a handful of blackberries, dark and glossy. Alara took them with real gratitude. The small kindness outweighed any hothouse trinket. "Thank you." She split the berries, offering half. He accepted with a nod. They sat without speaking, watching sunlight slide across the clearing. After a moment, Ronan said, "Your sister might see more than you think." Alara weighed that as she licked berry juice from her fingers. Beatrice had always been the one who listened between the lines. She bent back to the paper. "Dear Beatrice." Asterisk, I have begun this letter a dozen times, never finding the right words. Here is the plain truth. I have chosen to remain on the ridge, not from spite, but because I have discovered a need I never knew I had. Mr. Vale, Ronan, has taught me to make fire, mend garments, patch a roof. Each day is hard, and each day is enough. I know this will grieve Father and shock you. Polite society will call it scandal. But for the first time, I am choosing what feeds my own peace instead of someone else's plan. Please try to understand, even if you cannot approve. If Father allows it, write to me, care of Grayson's Mercantile, Pine Hollow. With all my love, Ilera, asterisk. She read the smudged lines once more. Like her new life, the letter was neither elegant nor proper, but it was hers. She folded it with care, aware of Ronan's quiet presence. Will you ride in with me tomorrow? First light, he said. Dusk pooled in the hollows as the weight slipped from her shoulders. The letter could not carry everything, but it was a bridge, thin, honest, between the girl she had been and the woman she was becoming. Hold still, Ronan said, settling the rifle against Ilera's shoulder. Breathe in, let half out. Hold. She sighted the pine cone perched on a stump 50 yards off. 2 months ago, the notion of firing a gun would have appalled her. Now it felt as natural as filling the water bucket. Steady, he murmured near her ear. His hands nudged her grip a fraction. When you're ready. Ilera exhaled, squeezed. The crack rolled across the clearing. The cone sat untouched. Close, Ronan said, no trace of frustration. Again, October had set the ridges ablaze, aspens shivering gold against dark fir. With the colors came colder nights. Game would thin soon. Time to fill the larder, Ronan had said that morning. Time you learned to hunt. On the 5th shot, the pine cone burst into splinters. I did it. Ilera lowered the rifle, mindful of the safety he had drilled into her. A rare smile brushed Ronan's mouth. Good. Tomorrow we track deer. Walking back, Ilera watched how he moved, eyes sweeping, feet silent on the needles. Once she would have called him savage. Now she saw harmony. You never told me how you lived after your parents were lost, she said, breaking the hush. You were young, weren't you? Ronan nodded, face unreadable. 14. Same as Beatrice, Ilera said quietly. Ronan walked several paces in silence. Father taught me tracking, snares. After the flood took them, I just kept on. A boy's whole world erased in one night of water and mud. Ilera's chest tightened at the picture of him alone. No arms to hold him, no voice to hush the dark. The town didn't help. His mouth flattened. Some tried. Most waited for me to die, like my folks. When I didn't, they called me odd. Easier to look away. They reached the shack as dusk bled violet across the ridge. Ilera's coat, Ronan's old one, cut down a fit, snagged on the doorframe, and lost 2 of its last buttons. Drat, she muttered, pinching the torn placket. Need spares before real cold. Later, while she stirred venison and wild onion, she noticed Ronan hunched by the fire, big hands busy with something small. He had picked up a shed elk antler on the walk home and was carving it in steady, silent strokes. He worked through supper, brushing off talk with the single-minded focus she had learned to read. Only after the tin plates were scrubbed did he cross the room and open his hand. For your coat. For buttons lay in his palm. Perfect discs of antler, polished warm, each etched with a tiny 4-point star. Ilera lifted one, thumb tracing the delicate lines. They're exquisite. Bone outlasts wood, he said, ducking the praise. Thank you, she whispered, closing her fist around them. The hours he had poured into those small circles felt heavier than any jewel. Evening settled into routine. Ronan oiling traps, Ilera stitching buttons by firelight. Wind prowled the eaves, whispering winter. Cold comes early here, Ronan said, testing a spring. North wall needs chinking tomorrow. I'll help. After the hunt lesson. He nodded, accepting her as partner in readying their home. Their home. The phrase no longer startled her. She held the coat to the flames. The antler buttons caught the light like tiny moons. They suited the garment, and her, better than the plain bone discs they replaced. Will we be ready? She asked. The question reached past mud and moss to the months ahead. Ronan's eyes met hers across the room, steady as a lodgepole. Yes. One word, solid as the ridge itself. They would meet the snow together, the bond between them hardening like green wood in a slow fire. That night, Ilara fingered the carved stars before sleep. From shed antler to useful beauty, just as she had been shaped, not broken, but honed into something truer. She was no longer enduring a sentence. She was carving a life, one small star at a time. The first snow arrived ahead of the calendar, draping the world in hush. Ilara watched through the window, breath fogging the pain, as the forest turned to crystal. Beautiful, she breathed. Ronan glanced up from splitting kindling. Dangerous, too. His caution did not dim her awe. 3 months had taught her that splendor and threat walked the same ridge. They had spent weeks laying in stores, jerked meat, late huckleberries sealed in crocks, walls packed tight with mud and pine needles. Their root cellar brimmed with potatoes, carrots, and turnips from the patch they had coaxed out of mountain soil. Firewood rose in a neat cord almost to the eaves. Comfortable enough, Ronan had said, a thread of pride in the words as they stood back to survey the work. Snow kept falling, soft and relentless, until the world outside the window was nothing but white hush. Ilara helped carry in the last armloads of wood, the effort chasing off the cold. Done. Ronan judged as night swallowed the ridge and the wind began to keen. That night a scratch settled in her throat. By morning it was a cough that rattled her ribs. By noon her joints burned and her skin flashed hot, then cold. Just a chill, she insisted, but by dusk she could not stand. Ronan half carried her to the pallet, piling every blanket over her shivering frame. Sleep, he said, voice low. Fever dragged her under. She drifted through dreams, her mother smoothing hair from a child's forehead, Beatrice reading fairy tales by candlelight. Even her father, stern face softened, murmuring, "Rest easy, girl." She surfaced now and then to Ronan's hand, steadying a cup of broth against her lips, or the cool press of a snow-damp cloth. His calm mask had slipped. Worry lived in the set of his mouth. "Don't go," she rasped once, clutching his sleeve. "I'm here," he answered, and stayed. Days melted. Her world shrank to the rasp of breath and the gentle weight of the cloth. She woke once to find him slumped against the wall beside her pallet, head tipped back in exhausted sleep, one hand still curled around the rag. Shadows carved new hollows beneath his eyes. "Ronan," she croaked. He came awake instantly. "What do you need? You should lie down properly." "I'm fine." He wrung fresh snow water from the cloth and laid it across her brow. The cold was bliss. "How long?" 4 days. Fever broke last night. She tried to push up. Her arms trembled like new willow. 4 days. "You'd do the same," he said, as if that settled everything. And she would. When had that happened? When had the silent ridge man become the still point of her world? "My mother died of fever," she whispered. "I was 12. I was terrified." "I know." He dipped the cloth again. "You spoke of it." Heat flooded her face. "What else did I say?" Something flickered across his expression. Hesitation, maybe fear. Nothing that matters. But he would not meet her eyes. Over the next 2 days, strength crept back in slow degrees. Ronan's reserve had thickened, yet he hovered, broth laced with bitter willow bark, extra wood on the fire, the palate fluffed with fresh pine boughs. When she finally sat at the table for a real meal, the tension eased from his shoulders like snow sliding off a roof. "Thank you," she said that night, watching him bank the fire, "for nursing me." He gave a short nod. "Rest more tomorrow." Still weak. "Ronan." She waited until he turned. "What did I say in the fever?" He worked the frayed cloth between his fingers. "You called for your mother." "Beatrice." "A beat. And once my name." "Your father," he finished, eyes flicking to hers then away. "You said you felt safe here with me." Ilara's pulse stumbled. Had the fever spilled more? The slow-blooming warmth she still hadn't named? "It's true," she said, voice steady. "I do feel safe with you." Ronan gave one short nod, but something loosened in the set of his shoulders, as if a knot he'd carried for days had been cut. Outside, snow kept falling, sealing them inside their small, sturdy world. Alara watched him move through the evening chores, no longer a stranger or a sentence, but the fixed point around which her days now turned. December arrived with iron cold and drifts that climbed the window glass. Alara had shaken off the last of the fever. Ronan still tracked her with quiet eyes whenever she stepped into the wind. Their universe shrank to the four log walls, yet the walls never pressed. Days followed the sun's brief arc. Melt snow for water, feed the fire, check the nearline snares. Afternoons belonged to mending, carving, preserving. Evenings were for talk and rest. One night, while straightening the shelf, Alara's fingers brushed cracked leather behind the salt crock. Asterisk Robinson Crusoe asterisk, she read aloud, surprised. The spine was split, pages soft as cloth. Didn't know you kept books. Ronan glanced up from twisting wire. My father's. Inside the cover, faded ink, asterisk to Caleb Vale, may these pages guide you. Christmas 1845, asterisk. Your father was Caleb. He nodded, hands never pausing. Have you read it? Can't. No shame, just fact. He started teaching me letters. Then the flood. A shrug. Never finished. Alara turned the revelation over like a smooth stone. In her old life, even the stable boys scratched their names. Shall I read it to you? She asked on impulse. Ronan's hand stilled. Why? Long nights. And it's a grand story, man against an island. A little like you against the ridge. Interest flickered. Pa, read it to me before sleep. She opened to the first page. I was born in the year 1632 in the city of York. A new ritual took root. After supper, Alara read for an hour while Ronan worked, whittling, oiling leather, mending nets. He listened hard, questions sharpening as the nights grew. Why keep a slave? He asked the evening Friday appeared. A man ought to be free. Alara paused, struck by the clean edge of his justice. Some believed they had the right. Some still do. Wrong, he said flat and final. She smiled. For all his years outside society, Ronan carried a surer moral compass than most who wore Sunday suits. Halfway through the book, her voice rasped dry. Without a word, Ronan set a tin cup beside her, pine needle tea sweetened with her last scrape of honey. Thank you, she said, throat eased. He tipped his chin toward the pages. Thank you for the words. As the nights of reading unfolded, Alara found herself studying Ronan's face more than the page. The mask he usually wore cracked in small, telling ways. A tightening at the brow when Crusoe faced shipwreck, a faint lift at the corner of his mouth when the castaway tamed the wild goats. You're like him, she said one evening, closing the book on her usual chapter. Resourceful, self-sufficient. Ronan turned the idea over. Difference is, he kept waiting for rescue. Wanted to go back. And you don't, she asked soft. His gaze crossed the small space between them. Not anymore. The words settled, heavy with everything neither had yet named. What about you? He asked after a breath. Still want rescue. Alara pictured the Grand Lodge, the rustle of silk at teas, the life measured in calling cards. Then she looked at the table they had planed smooth together, the bundles of dried sage overhead, the curtain that marked her corner. No, she said, this isn't exile anymore. Ronan nodded. Hearing the rest, she left unsaid. What had begun as survival had quietly turned into choice, for both of them. That night, after the fire burned low and they had retreated to their separate sides, his voice drifted through the dark. Alara, yes. Long pause. What happens to Crusoe in the end? Does he stay or go? She smiled into her pillow. He goes back to the world. But he's never the same. Silence stretched so long she thought he slept. Then, barely a whisper. Some changes don't unmake themselves. Alara pulled the blanket higher. The girl who had arrived in kid boots and fury was gone. Like Crusoe, the ridge had rewritten her, and she suspected the old world would fit like a coat 2 sizes too small. The knock came in the teeth of a January gale. Alara and Ronan froze, eyes locking. No one climbed the ridge in such weather. Ronan reached for the rifle, motioning her behind him. Who's there? Beatrice Voss, came the muffled answer. Alara shoved past him and flung the door wide. A snow-crusted figure stumbled in, scarves, coat, hood, then pushed the wrappings down to reveal Beatrice's wind-burned face, auburn hair escaping in damp curls, chin set with their father's own stubborn line. Alara dragged her sister inside, beating snow from her shoulders. Are you mad? How did you find us? Grayson at the store drew me a map. I paid his boy to sled me up. Beatrice glanced at Ronan, who had lowered the rifle but still stood alert. He's waiting down the trail. Wouldn't come the last quarter mile. Alara made hurried introductions. Beatrice offered her gloved hand. Ronan took it with careful gravity. You're half frozen, Alara said, steering her to the fire. What could possibly? Father's in Denver on timber business. Gone a week. Mischief glinted in Beatrice's eyes. My only window. She dug into her coat and produced a small brown parcel. Merry Christmas, fashionably late. Alara unwrapped a scarf of soft wool, blues fading to storm cloud gray. You knit this. She ran her fingers over the even stitches. Started the day you left. Wasn't sure I'd ever hand it over. Beatrice's gaze flicked to the door. Ronan cleared his throat. I'll see to the horses. Give you space. He slipped out into the howl. The latch clicked. Beatrice leaned in. Clara, is it true? Beatrice's gaze swept the small room. Rough walls, smoke-darkened beams, the single shelf of Crocs and tin cups. Father swears you'll break once winter truly bites. Alara wound the new scarf snug around her throat, while still carrying the scent of Beatrice's cedar chest. I'm not breaking, Bea. I'm finally telling myself the truth. She took her sister's cold hand. I know it looks mad from the outside. Is it because of Mr. Vale? Beatrice asked straight out. Are you attached? Heat rose in Alara's cheeks. It's complicated. So there is something. No accusation, only curiosity. He's nothing like Father painted, Alara said. Less wild, more honorable than any man I met at the lodge. Beatrice studied her a long moment. You're different. There's a steadiness in you now. I found a reason to get up every morning, Alara said, groping for words. What I do here matters. Not because I'm Harlan Voss's daughter, but because my hands keep us alive. Beatrice's eyes softened. I envy that certainty. Alara squeezed her fingers. Your turn. Tell me everything. For an hour, the cabin filled with Lowland news. Everett Lang engaged to the banker's daughter. Father swallowing up 2 more ranches. Pine Hollow still whispering about the lost Voss girl. Father won't say your name, Beatrice admitted. But I caught him with your old volume of Keats, reading by the lamp when he thought the house slept. Alara's throat tightened. She missed the man who had once lifted her onto her first pony, not the one who had shipped her away. The wind rattled the shutters. Beatrice glanced up. I should go before the trail closes. Impossible, Alara said. You'll stay till it blows over. Ronan stepped in, snow shedding from his shoulders. Alara explained. Without hesitation, he said, I'll bunk in the lean-to with the wood. You two take the shack. That night the sisters curled together on Alara's pallet, like children hiding from thunderstorms. He loves you, Beatrice murmured as embers settled. What? Who? Alara asked, though she knew. Mr. Vale. It's in the way he watches when your back is turned. How he sets the kettle on before you've said you're cold. Beatrice's voice held quiet certainty. And I think you love him, too. Alara stared at the dying glow. Even if I did, Father would never. Since when does Alara Voss let Harlan Voss choose her heart? Beatrice smiled in the dark. The girl I knew before would never have asked permission. Alara traced the scarf's soft edge. Maybe the courage she had grown into reached further than axes and rifles. Morning broke clear and glittering. Ronan brewed coffee while Beatrice laced her boots. Promise you'll be careful, Alara said, hugging her fierce. Don't let Father know you came. I can manage Father, Beatrice replied, chin high. Just keep writing. They watched the sled glide down the white trail until it vanished among the pines. She's got your fire, Ronan said beside her. Alara touched the scarf. More than I gave her credit for. February hurled its worst. A 3-day blizzard that turned day to dim twilight. Snow pressed against the windows like a living thing. Wind howled like a living thing, clawing at every seam they had sealed. Worst in years, Ronan muttered, feeding the fire another split of pine. The flames guttered, starved by the backdraft. Alara pulled Beatrice's scarf higher, knees to her chin. 3 weeks since her sister's visit, and Beatrice's parting words had lodged under her ribs. He loves you, and you love him. Every shared glance since it carried the weight of that truth. "Roof holding?" she asked as a gust slammed the walls. Ronan's eyes lifted. Roof sound. Chimneys the worry. The old stone throat, built by Ronan's own hands years ago, had begun to list. Smoke rolled back into the room instead of rising, thick and acrid. "If it goes," he said, "we lose heat." In this he didn't finish. They both knew. He ducked outside, returned rhymed with frost, resolve set. "We rebuild the hearth." From inside. Now, during the blizzard, no choice. They rolled back the bearskin, bared the packed earth floor. Ronan banked the fire to embers. Alara hauled stones from the lean-to, river rock he had gathered last summer for just such a maybe. She mixed clay, straw, and ash in a mortar while wind screamed through the eaves. Hours bled away. Fingers numbed, backs ached. They worked shoulder to shoulder in the cramped space, passing trowel, stone breath. Like this. Alara wedged a stubborn rock low on the left. Ronan's gloved hand closed over hers, guiding the angle. The touch, brief and practical, sparked heat that reached her bones. Lantern light painted them in gold and shadow. The cabin's warmth had fled. Alara's teeth chattered though sweat cooled on her skin. "Almost," Ronan said, breath fogging. "Last course." They shaped a new lip around the old throat, bracing the leaning stack. When Ronan fed the embers fresh, kindling, smoke-bellied, hesitated, then streamed upward in a clean column. "It's drawing," Alara whispered. Ronan's tired eyes glinted satisfaction. "Should hold." They collapsed before the reborn fire, shoulders touching. Heat crept back into the room, but Alara still shivered. Without a word, Ronan gathered every blanket, built a nest on the hearthstones, and opened one arm in invitation. She settled against him. He tucked the wool around them both. "Thank you," she said, "for knowing what to do, for keeping us safe." His arm tightened. "We did it together." The simple truth settled between them like a third presence. Not rescuer and rescued, partners. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, the fire crackled over stones they had placed with their own hands. Alara drew a breath. "I've been thinking about what Beatrice said." "About why stay," Alara finished. Ronan shifted, firelight catching the question in his eyes. "She thinks it's because of you," Alara pressed on, pulse loud in her ears. "And she's partly right." His gaze held hers, steady, waiting. "I stayed first for myself," she said, "for the woman I found splitting wood and setting snares. But now," she drew a breath, "now it's you two." The words settled between them like the last stone in a cairn. Ronan's hand slid from beneath the blanket and closed over hers. Rough palm, sure grip. No speeches, no poetry, just the quiet lock of fingers. "Good," he said low. Outside, the storm hurled itself against the walls. Inside, the hearth they had rebuilt together burned bright and even. Alara rested her head against his shoulder, the solid weight of him anchoring her. Tomorrow would demand its toll. Tonight was enough. March arrived with the first tentative drips from the eaves. Snow slumped into brown patches, revealing earth that smelled of thaw and pine. After the blizzard, something unspoken had taken root between them. No more talk was needed. It lived in the extra second a mug was passed, in the way Ronan's hand brushed her back when he reached past. The old careful distance had melted with the snow. One afternoon, while Ronan walked the trap line, Alara swept the winter's dust from every corner. Spring's promise made her restless for order. Under Ronan's pallet, the broom snagged on something solid. A small cedar box, dovetailed and smooth, the kind of thing a man keeps for treasures. She hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside, a river stone polished like glass, a walnut bear no bigger than her thumb, a tarnished silver button, a folded letter yellow with age, and a gold pocket watch that gleamed against the humble company. Alara lifted the watch. Scrollwork framed the initials C.V. Caleb Vale. The back read in delicate script, asterisk time passes. Love endures, asterisk. Ma's words, Ronan said from the doorway. She hadn't heard him return. I'm sorry, she said, starting to close the lid. I shouldn't have. It's all right. He crossed the room and sat beside her on the floorboards. Meant to show you anyway. He took the watch, thumb tracing the engraving with the same care he gave a rifle barrel. Only thing of value my family ever had. Pa carried it every day. Said it reminded him minutes count. He opened the case. The face showed Roman numerals, hands frozen at 317. Gave it to Ma on their wedding. She had the words put in. Alera's throat tightened at the glimpse past his walls. In all their months, he had offered only fragments of the boy left behind. What were they like? She asked softly. Your parents? Ronan was quiet so long she thought the question would drift unanswered. Then, halting at first, the words began to come. Pa was a dreamer, Ronan said. Came west chasing gold. Found just enough to stake this ridge. A faint smile. Ma was the practical one. Taught school before they married. They'd spar like flint and steel, but Pa had a rule. Never let the sun set on anger. Alera listened, spellbound, as he unrolled memories he had folded away. Ma's herb garden, Pa's tall tales by lantern light, the squeak of a homemade fiddle on winter nights. They taught me everything, he finished, except how to keep breathing after they were gone. The raw edge of it caught in her throat. She reached without thinking and closed her fingers over his. You taught yourself the rest, and you did it well. His hand tightened. First years were ugly. Surviving's not the same as living. Took me too long to see the difference. The watch lay open between them, hands frozen at 317. That why you never carried it? She asked. Because it asked for more than survival. Ronan's eyes flicked to hers, startled at being read so clean. Pa said a man needs something to measure his days against. Didn't feel I'd earned the right. And now? He held her gaze. Now I know what he meant. The unspoken answer settled warm in the small space between them. Alera extended her palm. Ronan laid the watch in it, cool metal, surprising weight. She curled her fingers around it, feeling the heartbeat of his past. Your parents would be proud of the man you've made, she said. Something fragile crossed his face. He took the watch back, but instead of returning it to the box, he slipped it into his pocket. Time to carry it again, he said. That evening the space between their pallets felt smaller. When they settled by the fire, Alera leaned into his shoulder. His arm came around her as naturally as drawing breath. The watch ticked softly against his heartbeat, counting minutes now rich with purpose. April thawed the ridge. Snowmelt sang in new creeks. Green spears pierced the mud. After winter's long hush, they ranged farther each day, tallying broken fences, plotting a bigger garden. One warm afternoon, they worked side by side, Alera's hands, once soft as kid gloves, now sure in the dirt, setting pea and bean seedlings. More beans, she said, calculating. We'll want plenty put by. The coming year, the phrase no longer startled her. Ronan nodded, carving furrows with a sharpened stick. South Patch gets full sun. Could double it. The easy rhythm shattered with the clatter of hooves. 3 riders rounded the bend, Voss ranch hands, led by Foreman Jenkins. Faces hard, postures stiff. Ronan rose, stepping half in front of Alera, hand near the rifle leaning against the woodpile. Alera's fingers brushed Ronan's sleeve, steady, calm. Then she stepped forward. Mr. Jenkins. The foreman swung down, hat in hand but eyes cold. Miss Voss, your father sent me. Is he ill? No, ma'am. Fit as ever, and twice as angry. Jenkins drew a thick envelope from his coat, wax seal gleaming like a brand. Order me to deliver this and bring you back with us. Alera broke the seal. The single sheet crackled with her father's heavy scrawl. Alera, asterisk 6 months is indulgence enough. Your tantrum ends now. Return with Jenkins and take your proper place. Gossip festers. The judge's son waits if you insist on playing the fool. I will ruin the trapper who keeps you law, money, whatever it takes. This is not a request. Asterisk. Harlan Voss. She read it twice, the old thunder in every line. It felt like a letter from another lifetime. Jenkins cleared his throat. Well, Alara folded the page with care. Tell my father I'm grateful for his concern. I'm staying. Jenkins's jaw worked. He said we don't ride back without you. Then you'll disappoint him. Her voice stayed level, though her pulse hammered. I'm not detained. I choose this ridge. His gaze slid to Ronan, who hadn't moved, hand resting easy near the rifle. Vale, be smart. You know what Harlan Voss can bury a man under. No law says a woman can't pick her home, Ronan answered. Jenkins snorted. Unchaperoned with a ridge rat? Judge will call it something else. Alara stepped flush to Ronan's side. Tell father I'm well, I'm happy, and I'm done being bartered. That's final. Jenkins settled his hat, uneasy. He'll come himself next time, sheriff in tow. That's his choice. Alara met his eyes. Safe ride back. The riders wheeled and left, dust swallowed by the pines. The letter trembled once in Alara's grip. You steady? Ronan asked. She handed him the page. He never bluffs. Ronan scanned it, face darkening. What do you want to do? The question, plain, respectful, cut through every echo of her father's command. Any last flicker of doubt guttered out. I want to stay, she said. Here, with you. Ronan folded the letter, eyes locking on hers. Then we face whatever rides up that trail. They knelt back among the seedlings, but the light had gone out of the afternoon. Alara's hands moved on autopilot, pressing soil around the last pea shoot while her mind ran ahead to courtrooms and chains. He'll paint you as my jailer, she said, brushing dirt from her fingers. Claim I'm too weak-minded to choose. Ronan nodded once, grim. Figured as much. We need a plan, she said. Real counsel, not just hope. That night the letter lay on the table like a loaded rifle. Alara studied the small world they had built. Patched walls, smoke-dark beams, the garden furrows waiting for rain, and felt the first claw of fear that it could be taken. Town tomorrow, Ronan said. See what the law actually says. She leaned into his shoulder, grateful for the solid fact of him. Whatever came, they would meet it side by side. The lawyer's office smelled of dust and old paper. Mr. Fulton, thin as a fence rail, peered over spectacles and gave them the bleak truth. Harlan Voss owns half the bench in this county. If he swears his daughter's being held or is unfit, the judge will likely hand her back. Facts be damned. That's barbaric, Alara said. I'm 24. Frontier law still treats an unmarried daughter like chattel, Fulton replied. There's one door. He glanced between them. Marriage. A wife answers to her husband, not her father. The word dropped like a stone into still water. Outside, the walk to the horses was thick with silence. Marriage, for legal armor, not love, hung between them like a bad smell. We don't have to decide anything today, Alara said as they mounted. Ronan only nodded. Storms rolling in. Let's get home. Rain chased them up the ridge. They reached the cabin as the sky cracked open. Alara took up mending. Ronan sat at the table, knife whispering through cedar. The lawyer's solution echoed until she couldn't stand it. I won't trap you, she blurted. Into marriage just to keep me. Ronan's blade stilled. That what you think this is? Fulton made it sound like a contract, not. She stopped throat tight. Ronan set the knife down and crossed to the hearth, staring into the flames. His hand went to the pocket watch, thumb tracing the case. After Ma and Pa died, I quit looking past the next sunrise. Just kept breathing. He turned the watch so the firelight caught the inscription. This reminded me every minute costs something. Alara waited. He faced her. Marrying to dodge your father. That's not why I do it. His voice was low, steady. I do it because the days feel right when you're in them. Because I want tomorrow to have you in it, too. The rain hammered the roof. Alara's heart thudded against her ribs. I want that too, she said. Not as a shield, as a promise. Ronan crossed the room in 3 strides, took the mending from her lap, and set it aside. When he knelt, the floorboards creaked under his weight. Alara Voss, he said, will you marry me? Because we choose it, not because some paper says we must. She laughed once, a bright sound that cut through the storm. Yes, Ronan Vale, because I choose you. He rose, pulling her with him, and kissed her, slow, certain, tasting of cedar smoke and rain. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cabin the fire burned steady, and the future, for the first time, felt like theirs to shape. "Father, stop!" Alara's voice cracked like a whip across the trail. "No one is trapping or seducing anyone. This is my choice." Samuel Voss's eyes narrowed to slits. "Choice? You've been alone with this ridge rat for months. He's twisted your mind." Ronan's hand rested easy on the reins, but Alara felt the tension coiled in him. "Sir," he said, calm as deep water, "your daughter speaks for herself." Samuel's lip curled. "I speak for my family." He gestured to the four-armed men fanned behind him. "We ride to the mission. Ceremony's over before it starts." Alara urged her mare forward until she was knee-to-knee with her father. "Then you'll have to drag me, because I'm marrying Ronan Vale today, with or without your blessing." Samuel's face purpled. "You'll disgrace the Voss name." "The name I carry will be Vale by sunset," she cut in, "and I'll wear it proud." For a heartbeat, the only sound was the wind in the pines. Then Samuel reached for the rifle across his saddle. Ronan moved first, smooth as a hawk stooping, hand closing over the barrel. "Don't!" The foreman, Jenkins, shifted uneasily. "Boss!" Samuel's knuckles whitened. "You draw on me, boy." "Only if you draw on her," Ronan said. "Lower it." Alara's heart hammered, but her voice stayed steady. "Father, look at me. Really look. I'm not the girl you sent away. I'm the woman who chooses her own life. If you love me, let me go." Something flickered behind Samuel's fury, pain, maybe memory. His grip loosened a fraction. From the mission road came the clop of hooves. The minister, Reverend Holt, and his wife appeared on a bay mule, Bible tucked under one arm. He took a tableau and raised both hands. "Gentlemen, the house of God is 2 miles yonder. Shall we settle this with words or iron?" Samuel's jaw worked. The armed men waited on his word. Alara reached across the space between father and daughter, laying her hand on his sleeve. "Come to the wedding, father. Or don't. But don't make this day about anything but love." Minutes stretched like wire. Finally, Samuel let the rifle drop back into its scabbard. "I'll be there," he said, voice rough, "to see what kind of man you've chosen." He wheeled his horse toward the mission. The riders followed. Alara let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Ronan's fingers brushed hers, brief, grounding. At the little log church, sunlight slanted through the open door. Wildflowers spilled from Alara's hair onto the rough-hewn pews. Reverend Holt's wife played a battered harmonium. Samuel stood stiff at the back, hat in hand, face unreadable. When the minister asked, "Who gives this woman?" silence fell. Samuel stepped forward. "Her father does," he said, voice cracking on the last word. "Though she never needed my leave." Alara's eyes stung. She squeezed Ronan's hand. The vows were simple, spoken clear into the mountain air. Alara, take you, Ronan. Ronan, take you, Samuel watched his daughter kiss a ridge trapper beneath a cross of pine logs. When it was done, he approached, awkward as a man, and used his softness. "You hurt her," he told Ronan, "and no court on earth will save you." Ronan met his eyes. "I die first." Samuel studied him a long moment, then turned to Alara. "You're still my daughter," he said gruffly. "Supper's the first Sunday you can spare." Alara laughed through tears. "We'll bring venison." Outside, the mountain stood wrapped in spring green. Alara Vale swung up behind her husband, arms around his waist, the carved wooden fox tucked safe in her pocket. They rode home, two silhouettes against the vast, bright sky, the future wide open before them. Samuel Weston's gaze bored into Ronan, cold as winter iron. "You hurt her, and no badge or judge will keep you breathing." Ron's grip on Alara's hand stayed steady. "I cut my own heart out first." Weston's mouth worked, pride warring with something softer. He turned to the sheriff. "Papers were a mistake. My daughter's where she wants to be." Sheriff Miller folded the document with a shrug. "Your call, Mr. Voss." Weston faced Alara. "You're set on this?" "More than anything I've ever chosen," she said. He studied her a long moment. The girl he'd sent away, now a woman who met his eyes without flinching. Then ride to that church, he said at last, voice rough. I'll be there, to give you away, or to watch you give yourself. He swung back into the saddle. The riders followed, dust settling behind them. Ronan touched the split at his lip, then the ruin of his new shirt. Wedding finery's seen better days. Alara laughed, shaky with relief. You look perfect to me. They mounted and rode on, spring sun warm on their backs. The mission's steeple rising ahead like a promise kept. Inside the little log chapel, wildflowers spilled from Alara's hair onto the pews. Reverend Holt's wife coaxed a hymn from the harmonium. Samuel stood at the back, hat crushed in his hands. When minister asked, "Who gives this woman?" silence fell. Samuel stepped forward. "Her father does," he said, the words catching, though she never waited for permission. Alara's eyes glistened. She squeezed Ronan's hand. The vows were plain, spoken clear into the mountain hush. Alara, take you, Ronan. Ronan, take you, Alara." Samuel watched his daughter kiss a ridge man beneath a pine cross. When it was done, he approached, awkward as a bear in a parlor. "You wrong her," he told Ronan, "and I'll bury you myself." Ron met his eyes. "Count on me to keep her safe." Samuel studied him, then turned to Alara. "First Sunday you can spare, supper at the lodge. Bring the trapper." Alara laughed through tears. "We'll bring venison." Outside, the mountain stood wrapped in new green. Alara Vale swung up behind her husband, arms around his waist, the carved wooden fox safe in her pocket. They rode home, two silhouettes against the wide, bright sky. The future theirs to carve, one day, one choice, one love at a time. "Levi," Alara called, pulse quickening at the sight of a lone rider. Ronan stepped in from the porch, wiping sawdust from his hands. "Your father?" She nodded. Samuel Voss dismounted stiffly, hat in hand, the lines around his eyes deeper than she remembered. He took in the new cabin, the fresh pine boards, the porch rail Ronan had shaped with his own hands, the smoke curling from the stone chimney they had rebuilt together. "Place looks solid," Samuel said, voice gruff but not unkind. Alara stepped forward. "It's home." Samuel's gaze flicked to Ronan, then back to her. "Heard you put up a good crop." "Cellar's full." "Beans squash, enough to see us through," Ronan answered. Samuel cleared his throat. "Brought something." He reached into his saddlebag and produced a small burlap sack. "Seed corn. New variety. Early, drought-hardy. Figured your south patch could use it." Alara took the sack, surprised by the peace offering. "Thank you." Samuel shifted his weight. "Your sister's getting married come spring. Wants you there." He glanced at Ronan. "Both of you." Ronan's hand settled at the small of Alara's back. "We'll be there." Samuel nodded once, then looked at the mountains ringing the clearing. "Your mother always said the high country grew strong roots." His voice caught. Reckon she was right. Alara's eyes stung. "Will you stay for coffee?" He hesitated, then stepped onto the porch. "Could spare a cup." Inside, the new room smelled of fresh wood and hearth smoke. Samuel sat at the table Ronan had built, accepting a tin mug. For a while no one spoke. The only sound was the fire popping and the wind in the pines. Finally Samuel set the mug down. "I was wrong," he said to the table, then lifted his eyes to Alara. "About a lot of things. You're happy here." "I am," she said. He turned to Ronan. "You take care of her." "Every day," Ronan replied. Samuel stood, hat in hand again. "Supper's the first Sunday after thaw. Don't bring venison. Cook's tired of it." A faint smile cracked his face. "Bring yourselves." He mounted and rode down the trail without looking back, but slower than he'd come. Alara leaned into Ronan's side. He'll never say it outright, but he said enough. Ronan finished. She touched the seed sack. Strong roots. Ronan's arm tightened around her. Hours now. Autumn lights slanted gold across their mountain. The cabin warm, the cellar full, the future wide and bright as the sky above the ridge.